Awesome. So, guys, if you, in the spirit of inclusion and kind of being very transparent with the community, right, and sharing more detailed plan with everyone, thank you for joining and sticking around. This was an open call for anyone in the community to join and ask us any questions. I have a lot of my engineers and founders, Beatrice, James, Frank, as well as some of our founding engineers like Tazos and others on the team. Sean is on the blockchain team, Jonathan, and so on, as well as the design and product team to answer questions, right? And I wanted to share like the detailed steps. This is like the overview. You can see in the second tab, it's a detailed, right? I'll just quickly cover the overview of our quadratic voting and funding. We've had amazing feedback from the community, from all the CAs. So thank you for those of you that took the time and effort to review it, and we appreciate all the feedback. We took it to heart, every single one, whether good or critical. It's all really valuable feedback for us, and I respect the passion of the CA that went on our proposal and commented, and because of that we are here today. So hopefully we'll have half an hour to maybe an hour to talk about this, depending on if you guys have questions. So here's our timeline. There are some things here that are out of the scope of the two proposals, right? Obviously, because we have other things that we're building, not too many, just a couple. But here's kind of the timeline. We have just finished yesterday the full UX flow for the product as well. So if you guys have any questions specifically, like how do we create bounties, or how do we go about, voting for bounties and so on, right? Or for grants projects, right? Or how do we integrate SSI into our product? I would be able to share that directly, not just with words and Excel, but also in our Figma UX flow. Here are the deadlines and the priority for each project, right? From the UX flow to quadratic voting and funding, to doing the UST Fiat Transactions, to completing not just the UX flow, but the full design for the whole web app, including, and James will go more in depth into all of these, including, borrowing some of our AI and machine learning teams help for building like bounty amount recommendations, and in trying to figure out what the heck the bounty or the repository the project is about, with more NLP, integrating data from our partners like HireEasy and so on, and building out the product itself. Bounties MVP, Cloud ID. If you guys are more curious, this is the overview of our minimum viable product for the two proposals, Ashton, that we have in funding. Right, more step by step, because one of the things that the CA commented and pointed out is, hey, we only have a couple bullet points and not much there, and he wants to have a more detailed technical plan, like how does what work, pretty much, in order to awesome, thanks, James. In order to properly evaluate feasibility and auditability of the product, of the proposal.
No, that happened with us last time when we've given the technical details. It was too technical, but this time it was not too technical.
Right.
So we need to adjust. So yeah. I would say we'll be there in the schedule. In next 2 weeks, we'll have our entire team contribute to the open source.
Awesome. Thank you, Vinay. And, it's my first proposal, so I don't know how much is too much and how much is too little. I figured out that the proposals are already too long, so we didn't mean to
So
include
last
it.
time was my first time. We got funded the first time, and it was like a great thing for us. As in, like it was a great encouragement. And then I went to Emergo India for my education, and I hardcore fan of Cardano. So just going on. But my CTO is a good Solidity and a Polygon and an Ether developer. So it's
Awesome.
like we go hand in hand. But yeah,
Yeah.
Conma is like entirely inclined towards being a sidechain on Cardano. Let's see
Awesome.
what happens. We have the talent pool. We have the right partnerships. Let's do this. So we have 2 more weeks for the students to finish their exams, and then we have like a good talent pool to like just pick their brains. What have you learned,
Yeah.
or what do you want to learn? It's like what
Yeah.
have you learned, or what do you want to learn? Let's do this.
Yeah. There's a lot of passion on the Karma team, and I look forward to our closer, deeper collaboration, especially on the open source projects. And to be able to collaborate effectively, I think giving our co-founders chance, James, want to kick us off to share
Sure.
more about the detailed plan and kind of where we are with the different components of the product. Go ahead, James. Popcorn to you.
I have
Yes.
a quick question before that. Could you summarize quadratic voting before we jump in?
Yeah. So quadratic voting is actually quite complex, right? The formula is very simple. Behind it is just the cost of voting is like to second power, right? With every vote
Power
on
two.
the same project, right? So let's say that you have 100 votes voting power, and you want to vote for this all in for one project, then you can only do 10 votes for the same project, right? Assuming everyone else only has one vote, that is equivalent to voting as many as 10 people. But
So that needs to be there.
Yeah, that needs to be there because we're building quadratic funding, which means essentially based on however many people would crowdfund and donate to a specific project, right? Then we would use the quadratic cost structure to draw more money from matching pools from sponsors to add additional funding towards the crowdfunding for each individual grant or project. So in that way, we, no one single whale or entity, bad actor, can just put all the money into one project and then grab more money from the matching pool to their own projects. It allows people to contribute no matter how small and have a significant contribution and make their dollars or ADA go longer, so it can turn 1 ADA to 10 ADA, even to 100 ADA in some instances, right? So I saw a project on Gitcoin towards climate that they only raised $3,000 something from the individuals, right? I think every 3,000 people donated maybe $1, but from the matching pool they got over $220,000, right? So total like 230 something. Yep, actually you're right. It is a parabola. The voting power is a square root, and the voting cost is a second power. Anyways,
we need to talk about futurity rather than democracy. So futurity is something.
All right. Popcorn to you, James.
Driven.
All right. Yeah. So thank you, Nin. So I am over the design team as well as the IDE. So I handle all the designs. I have about 12 designers currently at the moment. And I am over the IDE team, which, like I said, we have about 2 developers at the moment for that. And then I also oversee the brochure websites as well. So as you can see on the full design, we are, now that we have the full UX flow, we are in process of updating our high fidelity screens. And next will be the clickable prototypes, so we can hand those off to dev so they can start building. We do try to hand those off one at a time as soon as we get them done so they can get started. So next after that is going to be the Fiat Transactions. So this is going to be integrating with Plaid. So we can get banking information, so people will be able to do ACH transfers and use their funds that way, as well as in the future doing crypto wallets and everything else. So right now we are in process of getting that set up. Next thing is going to be adding the wallet dropdown and doing the integration pieces there and testing. So after that, or at the same time as well, we're working on the Cloud IDE. So if you guys have seen in the past, we've been showcasing that quite a bit. It's something we're extremely happy about. But we did share the peer-to-peer collaboration piece. So right now we are testing locally, and here soon we'll be launching that live on an EKS cluster. And currently right now for the bounties MVP, I am in process with my team creating a GitHub app so we can make sure that we get all the data that we need and using Lambda functions, API gateways and stuff like that. So what's next, Nin? In the end, all the public websites, so all of the brochure sites. So looking at finalizing what build system I'm going to end up using, so we could start building those here soon. Kind of like Snapbrillia.com, just revamping with all of our new technologies and new features. And then after that, we will be taking our Cloud IDE and actually doing pre-builds of Haskell, Plutus, Marlowe, and Prism. So it's an easy setup that anybody would be able to use, that we provide access to. So a lot of the things that people struggle with initially starting off with these languages, we would have knocked out of the way immediately before you even start. And then it's the full suite of bounties. So we have our MVP bounties, and next after that would be the complete full feature set for all of our bounties. And that's it for me. Popcorn to you, Beatrice.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm the responsible for the web app, the Web 2. So right now, you see, James just finished to talk about the Fiat transaction, and I'm on the process now, building the front end and the back end of this connection for the transaction in order to implement the permit for the system. And then and you see for the bounty MVP. So you see, we gonna implement like I just said, the permit, and for not only the user side, but we're gonna implement it also in the client side as well. So now the end-to-end B2B web applications, this one is the user side, because our system is built like the user will come to implement create the bounties, and then the client will be the other client side will be like the one that execute the bounty. So now we almost let me see, almost like I say 70 to 90%, 70% done for the front end for the user side. Now we are focused on working on the client side, where we're gonna do the connection, like for connect the client now, the part where the client will execute. And so that's where we are now. And then can you go down? And I can say I have to add also for this thing where we are now, we have 9 developers, and we have some more to come. But everything is happening now because of them. We're so blessed to have them. And next step is gonna be we're gonna introduce. We have other partners like go to the ATH, using the ATS and integrate HRIS integration. So now we want to, the user can also adding their own a client, like we call it candidate as well, and that's why we will partners with those other system that we can they can find just when they create the application, so they can find those people there. So we are working as well to make the connection where this person, we're gonna, like you see the mentor mentees bounties. So this one will help us to when the mentor can choose their own mentees. So that's what next coming on. And then I think next will be Frank. We'll talk about the quadratic voting. Frank.
Yep, thank you, Beatrice. So on the Web3 side, we have a few core focuses. Our immediate kind of upcoming deadlines are around quadratic voting and funding in an MVP scope. This is built upon the foundations of research, initially from Glenn Weil and Stephen Lally, popularized, as you've probably seen, in the Ethereum ecosystem through Gitcoin. And this is essentially us transposing the Gitcoin model to the Cardano ecosystem. We have a series of subtasks here. I will note that this project, Quadratic Voting and Funding, is open source. So we're proceeding as an open source team and inviting the open source broader community to help us accelerate innovation.
I'm gonna put the links to our open source repositories on GitHub in the chat.
Yep. So anyone on the call who is a Haskell or Plutus engineer who's been through the Plutus Pioneer program, or you're curious to kind of jump in further into a practical project, please feel free to reach out to us. Our Web3 team meetings are also open, and we'll be actually meeting with some Conma Labs team members as well, engineers from your community. So yeah, we welcome collaboration, open source. It's a spirit of collaboration, and we're doing this completely out in the open, in public, so you can view the code. Right now, we're kind of at the MVP stage of this, and you can see in cell 103A there's this finalized function that actually, I'm gonna let Tazos Valtinos on our team and Sean Zhang have been focusing very heavily on the Haskell contributions in the repo. Would you guys like to talk through cell A103 in more depth from a technical perspective?
Yeah, sure. Like if there are any questions or that you want us to answer. So basically, what we're trying to achieve in terms of like the quadratic, like the formula itself is not something very, very complicated, to be honest. It's just a mathematical formula that you can apply in different terms. You can apply it with the increasing value of the cost of every additional vote, or you can do it using voting power. We will use the voting power method. The complex part is, of course, implementing it on Cardano, like using Haskell and Plutus is not as easy as it would be in an OOP language. There are like a lot of components that we need to take care of. And unfortunately, the PAB is not on a very well developed level. So that means that we need to take care of a lot of heavy lifting on the off-chain side. So in terms of actual components and what we're going to do is what we're currently doing. Me and Sean, we're working really closely with that. So we're defining like our data structure or our data types, because our whole contract will be heavily based on our data structures. So all of the actions like initiating a matching pool, voting for a project, or subscribing your project for a specific grant, we will translate that to an actual Cardano transaction, which will actually create a UTXO that will live under our contract with a datum attached to each UTXO. So once every action is translated to a UTXO, and once we reach the end of the voting process, then there will be one heavy function that we will try to code with Son as good as we can, which will basically query all the UTXOs. It will identify its action. So we will add, for example, a specific parameter into our datums, which will identify that action. For example, if it's going to be a voting action, or a project subscription action, or a fund creation action, for example. And we will, in the end of the voting process, we will query for the ones that are vote related. And then we will apply the quadratic formula on those. We will apply some other functionalities on the project submission and on the additional contribution of funds into the initial pool. And in the end, after the whole quadratic formula spits out the winners, we will allocate the initial funds based on the weighting that the initial fund decided to distribute the funds. And of course, based on the winners that will be defined from the whole quadratic voting process. That's in a nutshell. I don't know, I hope that made sense. Yeah, this is the stage we are at the moment, and we're constantly working on defining all the whole structures with Sean.
Yeah, and by the way, community, thank you, Tazos. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask at any point, right? We have enough, technical resources and personnel here that would be more than happy to answer your questions. And no question is stupid or outside of the realm that you can ask.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Tazos, thank you so much for the very eloquent technical explanation. I will also open up Sean, if you'd like to add any thoughts here. Any further insights you'd like to share?
Yeah, I was just going to say what Tazos said, but yeah, that's the state of where we're at right now. We're just defining, we just define like all the data types that we're going to use, and then using those data types, we're going to create those functions, and
Yep, awesome. And I will note that everyone on the Snapbrillia Web3 team is going through the Plutus Pioneer Program iteration 3 right now, in preparation for iteration 4, which is beginning likely sometime seemingly early July, around that time period. We're also completing the Atala Prism Pioneer Program, but that will come into play in the next kind of section here. But I see, Kendrick, you have your hand raised. Any further insights you'd like to share?
Well, I just wanted to comment, that it's just, for myself, it's really a thrill to have such a talented team working on such an important problem. Because, there's in the cryptocurrency community, there's a lot of aspiration for decentralized governance. But I think most people don't really understand how difficult that is to actually achieve. And I've spent the second half of my career studying complex systems, and there's a very basic principle in complex systems called preferential growth. And what this means is that when you have a network like a community, someone new coming into the community tends to preferentially attach to the most popular nodes. And that very natural process leads to centralization of systems. So you have to be very thoughtful about how you design processes like voting to counteract that kind of natural process. And I think this is one of the key enabling steps, because it recognizes that voting power increases quadratically, so you should have to pay quadratically for more influence. And then it does another thing that's really hampering the Catalyst program already, is that no one can have complete knowledge about the whole Catalyst program. Even the delegated reps are not really going to be knowledgeable enough to vote across the entire spectrum of all proposals. And so allowing people to have a budget and focus their time, effort, and interests, and ultimately voting power on the projects that are important to them is a really critical principle. And this is a very elegant system that kind of accomplishes those two key things about really trying to achieve diversity and broad decentralized influence, and recognizing some of the more subtle characteristics of voting processes that are needed to make that happen. And then also, being able to invest your time and voting power wisely. So I'm super excited about the project and happy to be working with the Snapbrillia team on it. And I just really wish you all well. And I guess we, in a sense too, I'm saying you all because I'm sort of working as an advisor, as someone who, identified these issues last year. And it's just want to say it's really great to have such a talented team working on it.
Kendrick, we're super blessed to have you in the community supporting us. That's all I can say. And there's a lot of work ahead of us,
Yeah.
right? But we have a good team to build this and pull this off.
Mhm.
So
Great.
Yep. And I echo Nin's sentiment. Kendrick, we're thrilled to have you as part of our Web3 team. Your mentorship means a ton to us, and we really enjoy our conversations on our Web3 meetups. And we foresee these only growing in, as the community grows around the project, hopefully, on the open source side. So fantastic. Anyone else on the call have any questions around this quadratic funding voting initiative that we're focusing on? Okay, if you do, please feel free to reach out to us either through our GitHub open source repo. And I think we also have if you were on the call earlier, I think everyone in here was on the call earlier. We have our contact information in the Google Jamboard. So in parallel to quadratic voting and funding, we're also very intrigued and passionate about the potential for verified credentials within an SSI wallet. This idea of an issuer holder verifier model for proof of reputation and proof of identity kind of wrapped into the same system really intrigues us. And we call this here the on-chain practical resume. So it's this idea of a resume in the future will include a collection of verified credentials that are stored within an SSI wallet. for non-supported data types, so say non-alphanumeric strings for primitive SSI wallets that we see today that are progressing gradually, we're thinking of a IPFS CID link to where you can store those broader data types externally. Still celebrating the Web3 ethos, and then fetch those through a custom query tool. This is what cell A124 is referring to, in case you're reading the query tool piece. The idea of having an association, if you will, of issuers is something that also is important here. So say, MIT or another school can be an issuer, certified issuer of a diploma, for example. Snapbrillia is a certified issuer or can be a certified issuer of technical skills assessment proof or proofs. These could be in the form of running a successful bounty. It could be in the form of winning a hackathon. Eventually, we'll have the mentor-mentee ecosystem to where you've completed a successful internship, say, and proof of that can be issued by some organization, some company that acts as a certified issuer. Now, one of the problems, or actually one of the challenges here, is how do we onboard enough certified issuer participants from the analog world into this ecosystem to build a store of value at scale. So one of the initiatives is simply communication. So one example here is, going back to the first example, MIT. So if MIT joined as a certified issuer, it means that any alum of MIT or any future student graduating could then store proof of that diploma in an SSI wallet that they have complete ownership over. And one of the beauties of SSI wallets are that they are non-chain dependent. So this is technically the fuller or pure vision for interoperability because it's not technically Cardano dependent. But one of the reasons we like the Itala Prism project and the surrounding projects like Roots ID, Proofspace, are that they are focused on the open source aspect as well. So we can build upon a foundation where people can have complete ownership, non-chain dependent, and this eventually leads into the zero knowledge proof domain, where if you implement what are called ZK snarks or ZK snark philosophy around SSI verified credentials in a wallet, then you can get to a situation where you can truly protect users' information. For example, when you're applying for a job or applying to a school, you could utilize a ZK snark to verify your eligibility, and you would not have to disclose any further information. You wouldn't have to disclose ethnicity, gender, some other attributes that arguably are not required or needed to derive a proper assessment of eligibility. So there are a lot of benefits here. This collection of task tracks or tasks are progressing. 515 is our goal for a rough implementation utilizing the Roots ID SSI wallet. And then through the Itala Prism Pioneer Program, we are progressing further with our partners in Proofspace and Learnership. Does anyone have any questions around this idea of proof of reputation meeting proof of identity through verified credentialing?
Yeah, can I ask? Does you said it's working towards interoperability? So does that mean it's all serialized naturally or natively? I guess you might say to facilitate that, or how? Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, pretty much as an edge wallet, the wallet isn't built upon blockchain, so it's essentially it's non-chain specific, which even that fact in itself is very interoperable because you can basically bring it along with you to any other ecosystem, and you can tap into that ZK snark pipeline. But that's a little bit later on. The zero knowledge proof research is ongoing right now. It's not commercially available or ready. But eventually it will be. And
The follow-up question is, that a user can also take it offline into an air-gapped instance, for instance, if they wanted to keep a backup?
yeah, so that the idea of backups is different per identity or technically SSI provider. So Proofspace approaches this a little bit differently than Roots does. And it depends also on your governance framework. So depending in the future, like if you instantiate a SSI wallet, and through Snapbrillia, you'll be able to. We're essentially inheriting that backup mechanism through the provider. So in this case, it would be Roots ID. Is anyone on the call here from the Roots team? Just to verify, because that's a great question for the Roots team.
Yeah, I know Roots has a proposal in F8 for the backup and disaster recovery. Proofspace already has one, right? Proof is built on Hyperledger, however, more so now they're integrating Interoperability versus Roots is natively built on Prism, right? So that's why, like, you know, we love both. I met Lance and Nick, and they're all into this. Like in the SSI world, there's not a lot of players around, so you know, it's a very small world, and we all try to help each other. So I love Lance's openness for open source and Nick's, you know, functionalities, especially for providing a SSI flow, user flow that's end to end, including, you know, the moment they convert from being a visitor to an actual user, right?
Yep. And Ashton, that's a great question. I don't want to provide an inaccurate answer with respect to Roots ID and Proofspace's team. So I will defer to those teams to answer like in the deepest depth possible for you. And we'll do some research too, and maybe we can link up and keep you in the loop around the backup and disaster recovery plans for these two solutions in particular. These aren't the only ones, but these are two early ones, and these are the ones we're integrating with Snapbrillia.
So just to clarify, my motivation is not backup and disaster. It's distrust of the network. And I don't mean that in a mean way, but because if a user can't have their own backup that they can test against the network, then they don't know that the network is actually giving them a true account of what they should have. So that was my motivation.
Got it. Are you familiar with the verified credential like paradigm? Like the issuer holder verifier model?
Is that something from a Teleprism?
Yeah. Teleprism does teach through the Pioneer program. Even they're teaching from a broader kind of school of thought around SSI more broadly, which essentially they boiled down to this issuer holder verifier model. But the verified credential itself is kind of like, and you can think of it like an NFT. Actually, our team internally, just last night, we were talking about the differences between NFTs, so specifically CNFTs and VCs, or verified credentials. And there are some subtle differences. But I think at the heart of these differences is probably closer to the truth that you're seeking with that question.
Okay. I'll look it up. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll share the link in the chat.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And it's actually partially unsolved. So it's an active field of research. But yeah, great question. Any further questions around SSI verified credentialing?
Yeah, Mike, if you're here, he had a question earlier, and it was about how can we prevent Sybil attacks with quadratic voting using SSI solutions?
That's a really good question as well.
Or what are we doing to address that? Right?
Yeah, so at the heart of SSI is proof of identity. And at the heart of the concerns around Sybil attacks are basically lack of proof of identity. So essentially it's one step closer towards at least that patch for that concern. So if you have a SSI wallet and your identity is linked to your voting record and you have a proof of reputation linked to your actorship in voting across projects, DAOs, ecosystems, etc., then there's a deeper penalty at play than simply if you were completely anonymous and you were trying to be a bad actor. There's also a higher bar to entry because if in the future we foresee this happening, many voting systems won't even allow people to vote unless they do have an SSI wallet and they do have the verified credentials that can basically prove their identity. So those bad actors will be kind of shut out even before they start. And if they do get in, then they're risking their proof of reputation, which has cascading effects, negative effects into the future, way beyond just the play of that bad actorship. That's how I would conceptualize that. Is there anything further you'd like to add to that, Nin?
Yeah, I spoke to Nick at Proofspace. They do have a solution for Sybil attacks, essentially people creating bots or splitting wallets, whatever, right? Creating multiple SSI wallets. They do have a centralized solution. It is not a decentralized solution, so there's a centralized storage where they would check essentially the person's identity similarity across different DIDs, right? Yeah, maybe I'll get Nick on the call one day, and to get him to talk about that. So yeah, Ashton. I mean, Mike, he had to hop off, but I hope that answers your question, Mike. Anybody else is curious about Sybil attacks in quadratic voting, or just Sybil attacks in general, or quadratic voting in general? Megan, welcome to the call.
Yeah, honestly, I think that might be a nice breakout room at some point, like, because that could be a really deep discussion around the defense mechanisms for, I mean, you could just keep it as focused as Sybil attacks in voting systems even.
Yeah, the mechanism there could be, IP address, location, bank accounts linked, right? Crypto wallet strings, connections between the different crypto wallets. The only challenge with that kind of defense mechanism is the data has to be stored somewhere centrally, right? Where SSI credentials are not generally. They're stored in IPFS or some decentralized cloud storage usually. So
Cardano needs a decentralized storage as well as it. IPFS is something, as in generally the Web3 space uses, but we need something new. So yeah, dispute resolution to all this is like we are at a very nascent state. We are babies.
Yep. I agree with you. Cardano native IPFS solution would be really cool. I will actually give a shout out to another project that is outside
We need a Web3 storage for sure, because when we say Bitcoin is generation 1 and Ethereum is like saturated generation 2, and when we say like Cardano is generation 3, then we need a better IPFS, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I would invite anyone on the call who's interested in maybe building that for Cardano, which would be awesome.
Because it's all about Frank meeting Sangeet. So the CTOs need to meet.
Yeah, no, that's a brilliant idea. I think like I would invite people to also.
There are like a lot of ideas, but how do we do it? It's all about we need to come to consensus, right? It is not about you're not creating just for you. We're creating for the world. So how do we do it?
Yeah, to the how there, I would also invite people to look at the canister architecture found in Internet Computer. It's pretty cutting edge. I think there's a lot to be learned from the way they've designed that kind of canister and then the WASM layer within a canister architecture. Just for anyone thinking about decentralized storage solutions to bring to Cardano.
Anyone have questions about that? Feel free to ask me. I'm actually working on something integrating Cardano and ICP that hopefully will be.
Now that's collaboration.
Awesome.
So,
that is how you collaborate. That is what we've been doing, right?
Yeah, no, honestly, in my eyes, I think Cardano's ecosystem, along with the Internet Computer ecosystem, are the two projects that are really kind of trailblazing right now.
They not only that, they complement each other really, because what one does well, the other one doesn't do well, and then the other one does well, what the other one doesn't well. Really, it's kind of cool actually. But
and really cool, really cool. I'd love to actually have a further chat about basically Cardano ICP interoperability. I mean, that's a really important line of thought.
It's so cool. Like I'm really excited to actually share the proof, but it's really cool what it's possible because I've been working on it for a while. So,
but I think we're on a right track. E-learning, mentor, mentees too. This is exactly what the whole ecosystem like wants right now or deserves right now. So we just spot on. Let's do this. Let's see where it goes. It's all about like if it's open source, all of us contribute. All of us are open source. So
100%. It's all about asking the right questions, and seemingly what questions to ask are probably.
Today somebody asked me, so how do I collaborate? I don't know how to collaborate. Now that is a question, right? As in like they don't know how to collaborate. So it's all about like what do we have or what do they have and how do we collaborate? You have the same thing, you can't collaborate.
Yeah, that's a very much in the spirit of open source.
Then you go compete. Here it is not about competition, right? It is collaboration over competition.
Yeah, that's the beauty of open source, right? Like we're not competing here. Like we're just kind of trying to accelerate innovation towards something we think would be helpful for the world.
But I think what you already have is something really great. What, as in like what we got introduced to. Nin introduced us to Snapbrillia yesterday, and it was a great tool. It's a very good, simple tool where
you like it?
People need to understand, right? As in, probably like it is your first time here and the whole ecosystem. It was our first time last time. As in like Fund 7 is when we entered. Like we put in 7 proposals, we got 1. But we got funded for the best one, not anything else. We got funded for Conma Labs, where we wanted to build the talent pool. That is exactly what we are doing right now. Now we have the talent pool. How do we use the talent pool? How do you train? As in like, there are people who knows Haskell.
Yeah.
But they don't know there's blockchain. How do you educate them?
Yeah, no, I think you made a cool point earlier about.
Now, how is Cardano gonna help us? Now, how is gonna there needs to be a bridge, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because you talked about educating the educators, right?
No, we need to go to the grassroots levels for sure.
Yeah.
Because I'm not just talking about Haskell. I talk about 15 different sectors when it comes to Conma. But the best thing is we have Haskell, but how do we utilize? As in, how do we educate or create that awareness among the educators? We have
Yeah.
someone who teaches Haskell, but he doesn't understand blockchain. That's like the worst part, right?
Yeah, no, honestly, um,
No, that is exactly what we need to solve. So that is on
Yeah.
us. So that is what
for sure. And you guys
that is
have done a good
exactly what
job.
Snapbrillia and Kanma is gonna do.
Yeah, no, I love it. I
All
love
this.
I love your guys' whole ecosystem. I think you guys demoed or actually conceptualized for us on that call, our preliminary call, your first 5 services, right? Like the 5 core pillars, and then you have a couple kind of peripheral services. But I think
I
really,
would say you've like bridged the entire, as in like we've like located the resource and you've
Yeah.
been bridging it, as in like evaluating, right? So it's a
Yeah.
hand in hand.
Oh yeah, man. I think it's brilliant. And as mentioned, you guys are servicing a population in that time zone that may be difficult for some projects in this time.
Time zone is also one more problem.
Yeah, because honestly, right
Yeah.
now,
Meeting Min, the first meeting, we were like too smooth. We never had like that. Where do we associate or how do we collaborate? It just went hand in hand. We're like, okay, you have this, I have this. What do we do? Let's do this.
Exactly.
yeah,
So it went easy. So I'd
Um,
say I'm preparing from the ground part of it. You've been prepared, as in you're already done. You don't have to prepare on.
yeah, the beauty of collaboration.
I'd say
And
community, all of us need to work on
yeah,
it because
and
community is something all of us need.
yeah, and the beauty of being a member of Catalyst is that everyone's working on something, right? Actually, I'm all the proposals. Almost
When it comes
everybody
to
here,
Catalyst, I think
they're doing something good. Everyone's doing something.
Min is way active when compared to us.